First time we've ever performed this. Here's to you, Teddy Williams, Babe Ruth, and Rube Waddell, to Cy Young, Walter Johnson, Satch Page, Cool Papa Bell, Greg Maddox, Tommy Glavine, Frank Thomas, Bobby Cox, Tony La Russa, Connie Mack, Joe Torre, Jimmy Fox, Yogi Berra, Johnny Bench, and to Roy Campanella, Nolan Ryan, Whitey Ford, and Rapid Robert Fella. To Warren Spahn and Archie Vaughn, Stan Musial, Lou Boudreau, to Willie Mays, Tris Speaker, and Joe DiMaggio, Early Wynn and Tony Gwynn, Hank Aaron and Pie Traynor, Rogers Hornsby, Bobby Dorr, and to the Brothers Wayner. Mickey Mantle, Ernie Banks, Lou Gehrig, and Tom Seaver, Jackie Robinson, Pudge Fisk. Let's not forget Earl Weaver, Ducky Medwick, Dizzy Dean, Duke Snyder, Dazzy Vance, to Sandy Koufax, Al Kaline, to Tinker, Evers, Chance. A bow to Carl Yastrzemski, Melot, Three Finger Brown. They all played the game so well that they're here in Cooperstown. Trainer. They hit, they pitched, Rogers, they ran, they threw, they gave our souls a lift. They brought baseball into our lives, and that's a great, great gift. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dick. That gets us off to a great start this morning here at the Grandstand Theater. As you all know, we are opening a new exhibit today. I'm very excited about it. I think all of you are excited about it as well. It is called A Whole New Ball Game, and it's about baseball from 1970 all the way to the current day. And there's a very special individual we'd like to thank for really helping us to provide this exhibit to you. His name is Bill Janetschek. We want to thank him for the gift of this exhibit in memory of his dad. Bill, at this point, if you would, we'd like you to please stand up. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a nice round of applause for our benefactor, Mr. Bill Janetschek. We thank you very much, Bill. Much appreciated. And at this time, folks, we'd like to introduce our featured guest for the morning for our Voices of the Game program. He is a member of the Hall of Fame's class of 2000. Please join me in welcoming Carlton Fisk. Welcome, Carlton. He's well prepared. He's got water, he's got coffee, and he's got a microphone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bruce Marcus, and I work in the education department here at the Hall of Fame. One of the great benefits that I've had over the years is the opportunity to interview Hall of Famers, like today's Hall of Famer who joins us. And a bit later on, we're also going to be benefited by another special guest. We'll have an appearance from someone else who appeared in the 1975 World Series, though he played for the other team against Carlton back some 40 years ago. Carlton, I think it's most appropriate that you're here with us this weekend. Your career almost perfectly coincides with the span of years initially covered in our new exhibit, Whole New Ball Game. The new exhibit starts with the 1970 season. You played from 1969 to 1993. I know you saw the exhibit for the first time last night. Your initial impressions?
By saying my career started at the beginning of this, you're saying that I'm old? Is that what you're saying? Seasoned?
Seasoned would be a much better word, yes.
What I liked about it was that I went back there and it actually jogged my memory, which I have none anymore. But to go through that and say, this is where most people remember the game. All the names that Dick was reading bring back the history of the game. But this particular exhibit and the way it's been integrated with all the modern technology, where you can push buttons and you can see videos and you can see all the hard stuff in the exhibit, but you can also see all the live stuff too. That's going to be a pretty popular exhibit. You can spend hours. I would just kind of go through there, and I didn't want to leave. So you could spend 8 hours there just remembering.
Of course, you lived through that era. You played through that era. You're part of that history. Is it the way you remember baseball when you look at some of those photographs and some of the graphics and see the videos? Does that stir those memories for you in the same way?
Well, one, it makes me wish I was still young. And two, when I see stuff, I go, who is that young guy? I don't remember that guy. But it brings back the realization of how baseball has evolved or progressed. It seems as though for the longest time, baseball, stayed in the same place. All the great players, all the old ballparks, all the old memories, the nostalgia of it all. But since the 70s and maybe more recently, when technology has improved the way people perceive the game and view the game, and right up to all the new ballparks, old ballparks are either have disappeared or they're doing to the old ballparks what they've done in Boston. They've made an old ballpark new, or current anyways. They're trying to do the same thing in Chicago with Wrigley Field, and it's about time. But I think that is what, when people view this exhibit, you can see the beginning of that, I don't even want to call it evolved, because baseball is still a game of, pitching and catching and hitting and throwing, and the bases are still the same, and some of the ballparks, the dimensions are different, but people are able to get into the game to the point where they never were before, as far as yelling at the TV and stuff, like I did just like for 3 weeks. But I think that's nice, the way where baseball has stepped into the techno world.
The events of October 21st, 1975 are well documented in this new exhibit, Whole New Ball Game. In fact, the video of your historic home run is on a continual loop and will be seen.
It is at my house, too. No.
Is it?
No. I do every fall, though, when the World Series comes around. Obviously, they show that a few times, and I start sweating and say, what happens if this ball goes foul, But it never does, so that's great.
I wouldn't blame you if you had it on continual loop in every room of your house. 12th inning, Game 6, 1975 World Series, Red Sox and Reds. You're facing one of the least known pitchers on the Red staff, a right-handed relief pitcher named Pat Darcy. Did you know much about Darcy going into that at bat?
Does anybody here know much about Darcy? That's as much as we knew. I knew he was a right-hander. I knew he threw sinkers or heavy balls. But that game was just, sort of a contradiction in everything that happens in a game. You've got good pitching, you've got bad pitching. You've got good hitting, you've got bad hitting. You've got good base running, you've got bad base running. It was time to take a nap halfway through that game. This is past my bedtime. And it was to 2 days. It started on the 21st and ended on the 22nd. And it could have ended on the 21st if Denny Doyle had scored. But we're up 3-0 early, and then the next thing you know, we're down 6-3. And it looks like the game's over. And Bernie Carbo comes up, and he says, Fisky, you wouldn't be nothing without me. But
he was a little offbeat, right?
Yeah. Offbeat? Why don't you just say off? But there's the contradiction in Major League Baseball offense. Bernie Carbo had one of the worst swings a Major League Baseball player could ever have, and he just barely fouled a ball off and stayed alive, or he'd have been out. I mean, he should have been out. There's no way that bat should have touched the ball. And then the next swing is the best swing you could ever see in a game of baseball. I mean, you could put any of the greatest hitters of all time and put them image to image over that swing, and that's how you swing. I mean, that's the best swing. You know, and then bottom of the ninth, we're bases loaded, and we're supposed to win the game, bases loaded. Little fly ball to left field, and George Foster catches the ball, and Don Zimmer's our third base coach, and he's saying, no, 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 and Denny Doyle think he's saying, go, go. I should have paid attention to no, because he was out from here to Oneonta. But then, you know, and then the 12th inning rolls around, and I'm telling you, it was a tiring time because we got rained out day after day, and the weather was miserable, and it was wet, and it was damp, and it was just, you know, not baseball weather. But the bottom of the ninth comes around, and I come on deck, and for some reason, it didn't happen very often, I don't think, but I'm hitting in front of Fred Lynn. Usually, it seems like I always hit behind him because he was a better hitter than I was. But we're standing on the on-deck circle, and we're both looking at each other, kind of saying, geez, I wish this game would be over. And so I said, Fred, I'm going to hit one off the wall. Drive me in. Why I said that, I have no idea. Just one of those things. And 2 pitches later, it goes off the foul pole. And it wouldn't have gone fair if I didn't help it stay fair, you know. So then you come around the bases, and you could see the look on Fred's face. He says, what is it about me driving you in that you didn't understand? So the game was over, and it was just, sometimes I wonder whether it really happened to me or not.
Was not your bat that you
No,
used.
how
Explain
about
that.
I know, I looked in the exhibit out here, and the bat that I hit that home run with was Rick Burleson's bat. And Rick Burleson's our little shortstop, and we used the same model bat, but I used a longer bat and a heavier bat. And but I'll tell you what, that time of night, I picked my bat up and went, holy man, what is this, a lead bat or something? So I said,
Was that simply the fatigue of catching 11, 12 innings,
yeah,
the long
mental
night?
and physical, and, you know, just kind of, I don't know what it was. It just felt heavy. You know, some days you pick up a heavy bat, it feels light, and sometimes you pick up a light bat and it feels heavy. Well, my bat just felt heavy, so I said, hey, Rooster, can I use your bat? Let me use your bat. Yeah, go ahead. So 2 pitches later, it was over. The funny part about this now, I think this is funny. This bat I've had since 1975, and I haven't had it displayed. I haven't had it, you know. And so when Jeff calls and says, we're going to make this exhibit, you still have that bat around? I says, yeah, sure, I got the bat, yeah. I didn't tell him where it was, but. So, okay, Jane Clark, she's going to come down and get it. We were down in Sarasota at the time. She's going to come down and get it. So I'm going, man, I better find this bat. I don't even know where this is. So I'm looking around, and of course, it's like thrown in the back of the closet, and it's on the floor next to all the old sneakers that I have, you know. And so Jane comes down, and we go to the golf club and have lunch, and she's got white gloves on, and she's handling the bat like it's some little baby, you know. She puts it in this little sleeve, and it lays it down on the ground like this. I want and it's in the, you know. And here's how it was in the back of the closet. You're like, oh yeah, okay, here's it. That's how it was in the back of the closet. And she's holding this thing like it's going up, like an egg, you know. It was really cute. So
Burleson never asked for it back, huh?
he wouldn't have got it anyways if he asked.
Let's talk about some other aspects of that home run. The video of you using the body English to try to keep it fair is obviously very well known. It's been seen thousands and thousands of times. Did you ever lose track of the ball, though? It was a high fly ball down the left field line?
Never.
You saw it the whole time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. At what point did you know it was fair?
When he hit the pole.
Okay.
You
You weren't sure until that very
And
moment.
they call it the foul pole, but if it hits the pole, it's fair. So why wouldn't it be the fair pole?
Yeah.
But no, I saw it the whole way because I knew I hit it high. I knew I hit it hard. I knew I hit it far. Mm-hmm. And it was going, it was down here, and so he hit it. It's got a little draw to it, and it goes up like that. And it seems like it's curving, and I'm going, oh, stay fair. And it seemed like it was going like that, and all of a sudden it went straight and hit the pole. But no, I never lost sight of that ball. The only time I lost sight of it is after George Foster put it in his glove, and then it was gone, and nobody ever knew where that ball was.
Yeah.
Until 30 years later, George says, oh, I just happened to find this in my closet. Maybe it was with my bat. I don't know. I wish it was.
What did Zimmer say to you when he came around the third base bag? You remember?
Nothing.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. No, everybody's so happy. We were all jumping up and down, So it was a moment for sure. Lenny, just be careful now, okay? The great part about this whole thing is, Fenway Park has evolved over the years. They've just made it so nice compared to what it was when we were playing there. And I don't know if anybody knows anything about Fenway Park, but Fenway Park, the right field foul pole is called the Pesky pole. Johnny Pesky, little infielder, had like 11 lifetime home runs, and he's got a foul pole named after him. It's not the Fred Lynn pole, it's not the Ted Williams pole, it's not the Carl Yastrzemski pole, it's not the David Ortiz pole, it's Johnny Pesky. It's called the Pesky pole. Well, back a number of years ago, the new ownership, wanted to name the left field foul pole the Fisk pole because of that home run. And I grew up in New Hampshire, so the Red Sox was the home team. They were our team, them and the Celtics. I always wanted to play for the Celtics instead of the Red Sox, but that didn't work out very well. So now I've got this foul pole that's named after me in Fenway Park. So I'm going to be there. Every year the World Series is there. That home run shows up. Everybody comes to the ballpark, knows that that's the Fisk pole. And I grew up in a little small town in New Hampshire, and people say, wow, that's quite an honor, isn't it? What's it like to have that foul pole named after you? And I says, well, geez, how would you feel if 36,000 people are looking at your pole every night? It works all the time. It works all the time.
Fans, at this point, we would like to introduce our other special guest. I can think of no better time than to do so. This gentleman, we're very glad he could be with us this weekend as well. He's another participant in that 1975 World Series. He won 2 games in the series, saved a 3rd game. He was the closer for the Big Red Machine. In both 1975 and 76, he led the National League in saves. And in 76, he won Fireman of the Year honors. At this time, let's welcome Raleigh Eastwick to the stage. Raleigh. We're going to ask Raleigh and Carlton to trade microphone off for the next few minutes. Raleigh, let's talk a little bit about that series. That Red Sox lineup was pretty amazing. The talent between a Fisk and a Lynn and a Yaz. How tough was it for you, even as a relief pitcher, usually coming in for maybe 2 or 3 innings at a time, but to try to work your way through that Red Sox lineup? How intimidating was that?
It was a great lineup, and you have to remember that Jim Rice wasn't in that lineup because he had taken it was Vern Rule, I think, threw a pitch, hit his wrist, broke his wrist, and he wasn't in it. So who knows what would have happened if Rice was in that lineup. But it was a lineup that, you had to pay attention to consistently because you always had to concentrate and bear down. And, before the series started, we had an advanced scout like all teams did, and we'd have meetings and you'd go over all the hitters, and you sort of discovered from the advanced scout what weaknesses and strengths were. And, you just had to pay close attention to who you were pitching against and really bear down.
You played on those two phenomenal teams, two of the greatest teams that certainly I've ever seen. A lot of people, I think, would probably agree in this audience. The 75 series was much more difficult. 7 games, 76, you steamrolled the Yankees. So I guess some would say, well, that 76 team clearly was the better. Would you agree, or do you think 75 maybe was the better team?
Both teams were great. The 75 team, we started off slowly. We were several games behind the Dodgers in the division. But things after sometime in May started to click. We won at one point 42 or 43 out of 50, and we just started rolling from there. And I was telling my wife, we were talking about it the other day, you went to the ballpark every day knowing you were going to win, and it was an attitude, and it started with Pete Rose. Pete was a tremendous player, had tremendous instincts, and he set the pace for everything. He was a leadoff hitter. He'd come in the clubhouse before games, and he's, talked to everybody, but then all of a sudden you had, Morgan, Griffey, Bench, Foster, Concepcion, Geronimo, and it was a group that was unbelievably confident, and you just went to the park every day knowing you were going to win. And we used to talk at times during the season, you'd say, how would you like to be a starting pitcher? Come in here to Riverfront. You've got Rose, Morgan, Griffey. Then you have to get Bench, Perez, and Foster. And then if you managed to get by them, you had Concepcion and Geronimo. That was an incredible accomplishment to try and make. But, and at one time they were all hitting 300. So that was a toughie.
You had a pretty good manager, too, Hall of Famer Sparky Anderson, who, of course, was known as Captain Hook at that time, liked to go to the bullpen early and often. As a relief pitcher, did you like that, knowing that on any given night, he might be giving you the call in a lot of different situations, not just the 9th inning, but back then closers came in 6th, 7th, and 8th inning as well. Did you like having Sparky as a manager, given his preference to go to the bullpen so often?
I loved it. I loved pitching and being in the game. When I was in high school, I was being drafted, being looked at and then drafted, and that's all, Carlton, we played when we were kids. That's all we wanted to do. We wanted to play baseball. I'm sure most people out there, the guys, you wanted to play baseball. That's, just a dream. And, I got into the minors, and I struggled the first few years in the minors, and then I hooked up with a guy named Brooks Lawrence that was a pitching coach, and he really helped me a lot. And he was a guy that, got my career going and got me pushed forward. But getting to the major league level with Sparky, I loved pitching, and I remember sitting in a dugout, and I think it was in the '74 season. I was up at the end of the year, and there was a pitcher, Tom Hall. And it was late in the game was shaky, and he was down at the end of the dugout, and I was next to him, and he was saying, don't put me in, don't put me in. And I looked at him and said, are you crazy? We're at this level, we've got how many guys get to pitch in the major leagues? And I said, put me in, I want to pitch. And back then, short relievers pitched 2-3 innings at a time, and I did a lot of that, but hey, Sparky, anytime you want to throw me in there, I'm ready.
Yeah. I know it's been 40 years, but do you remember the scouting report on this gentleman?
Yeah, it's been quite some time. I just remember most hitters, and it's normal, keep the ball down, use your fastball slider to right-handers, left-handers keep the ball away. Don't throw any of the left-handers, particularly on that team. Don't throw down and in. Don't do that, whatever you do. But they had a great lineup, and I remember you beat Oakland in the playoffs, and I said, this is a pretty darn good team, because Oakland had won 3 World Series in a row. They still basically had the same team, and they did away with them to get to the series.
Now, Carlton, I can't imagine that facing Raleigh Eastwick was easy. Hard thrower through 3 quarters, kind of from the side a little bit. Could not have been that simple a task.
I hate to tell you this, but my memory is just so bad. I have a severe case of CRS, and I don't remember facing Raleigh. I don't. What did I do against you? Do you remember? You don't remember facing me either.
I just remember
'Cause he's
trying to keep the ball down to all you guys.
The thing was that, we had a lot of young players on our team, sort of unestablished players. And we weren't supposed to stand a chance against the Big Red Machine because they had 5 future Hall of Famers plus the manager on that team. So we weren't supposed to be able to hold up under the charge of the Big Red Machine. And I didn't play the first half of '75. I had my knee crushed at home plate in '74. So I never started playing until almost July of '75. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Reds didn't have much of a advanced scouting on me. But
the first game, you won 6-0, and Tion had a great game.
yeah.
For those who couldn't hear, Red Sox won the first game 6-0. It was Tion who was terrific in that game.
He had a terrific game. We went, after that game, that evening, the next day, we thought we got to get it in gear, and because this isn't going to be easy.
A couple more questions for Raleigh Eastwick. I know that back during your playing days, you were noted as an artist and as a sculptor. You've done paintings, still lifes, sculpted. Is this something you still do to this day?
I haven't done any of it at all. Someday I'll get back to it, but you get busy with life after baseball. You raise a family, and you get involved in kids' sports and all the other activities. But at some point, I'd like to get back to it. My mother was a watercolorist, and I have an older brother that paints a lot. I don't know if he still does much of it, but we have a lot of my mother's watercolors, and that's how I sort of got started getting interested in art, and when I was a kid. And my mother was always doing that, and we love a lot of her watercolors. But it's a relaxing, fun, thing to do, is to paint and draw, and at some point I'll get back to it.
Yeah. I understand you once gave one of your still life paintings to Johnny Bench, and he really liked it.
Yeah, it was a wedding present. It was before the 75, it was between the 74 and 75 season, and I had been taking art lessons in Pennsylvania. I was living in the Philadelphia area, and I had been taking art lessons from a guy that was 90 years old, and he was an interesting character, and he taught me a lot of techniques and things about painting, and I did a still life. It was a vase and some other things, and he loved it. And unfortunately, his first wife, they divorced, and she went her way, and I think she has the painting. So we got to try and figure out how to get that back.
Final question for Raleigh. I know that you're working in real estate, but you indicated to me earlier you and your wife are getting close to retirement, getting ready to relocate. You're in the Boston area now, but that's going to be changing soon.
Yeah, within the next year, we're going to transition down to Georgia. My wife's from Georgia. We love the outdoor stuff. We like fishing, shrimping, crabbing. Eventually, we'll take up some hunting. Her brothers do a lot of bird hunting, pheasant and quail and things. And it's, we're just real outdoorsy. So she's a world champion line crabber. So we'll, if you've never done line crabbing, go down to Georgia sometime and go line crabbing. It's great for kids, and it's a fun thing to do. But we're in the next year we'll be moving down to Georgia and have fun in retirement.
Well, Raleigh, we're thrilled you could join us for the program, for the opening of the new exhibit. You're a big part of baseball history in the 1970s as well. Thank you, Raleigh Eastwick.
Thanks for having me.
Continuing with the theme of our exhibit today, whole new ball game up on the second floor. Carlton Fisk is featured prominently in a number of areas. There's the continuous loop of the home run against Darcy. There's also another video we'll talk about later. There's also a photograph of a collision at the plate. The game was August 1st, 1973, Red Sox versus Yankees. A lot of people point to that game as really the renewing of the rivalry between the two franchises. That, some people say, is when this rivalry heated up again. Do you think that's true, Carlton? That was the day that it happened?
I don't recall if it was that day. I always recall that anybody that wore the pinstripes, they were the enemy. Maybe it didn't make a difference what pinstripes they were, but especially with the NY on the front. But yeah, we had a rivalry that was unparalleled. I don't think there's ever been one as intense, in baseball anyways, before, and it's not that way now either. But in the 70s, the Red Sox-Yankee rivalry was so intense. It felt, every time you're going to play them, it was a war. It felt like it, and you had to be prepared for it. And the only way that can happen, though, is that if you have two teams that match up pretty well individually, and if you go around the lineups, our team against their team, and then of course, Boston against New York, and being in the same division, it was a rivalry.
You think it's ever been matched since then in terms of the intensity?
I don't see it now, and especially now. I'm going, what do you mean, what? There's that guy talking to that other guy? Are you kidding me? All the fraternization that goes on now, all the smiling and laughing and conversation. If we did that in the old days, one, your teammate would knock you upside the head, say, what the hell you think you're doing? We're trying to beat those guys. Two, if you were out on the field, behind the cage or whatever, batting cage, when the gates opened and you were talking and fraternizing with the other team way back in the day, the league would fine you. The umpires would come early, and they would sit in the stands, and they'd make their judgments of who was talking to who and how friendly they got. And I'm not sure whether it makes any difference whether the Dodgers were playing the Padres or whether the Red Sox were playing the Indians. It doesn't make any difference. But that fraternization showed that there wasn't, the competition that it was supposed to be. And but now you see guys, at second base, there a couple of infielders come over and they're laughing and smiling and talking to each other, and before the game they're all around the cage, hugging and you go, what? The only time we got together was when Piniella crashes into you at the plate. That's how close we got,
That's right.
So that's the only time we made contact.
So even before the game, this was frowned upon, not just during the
Absolutely.
game, but before the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And now, oh man, don't get me started. But, in batting practice, the executives or the people from the organization used to be upstairs, and if you happen to take a ball during batting practice and hand it to a kid that's there, they'd fine you $25 for giving away organizational stuff.
And that was good money back then.
Now, every time a curveball hits the dirt, they're throwing it out.
Yeah.
And every time somebody makes a last out in the inning, they're tossing it into the stands. Every time there's a new ball in play, all the time. I can remember this. I don't know why, but if a ball didn't go out of play, we'd use it for 2 innings. You bounce it, you'd throw it, the guy, off the wall or whatever. Foul ball, if it hit the wall and somebody, infielder, picked it up, it went back to the mound. Pitcher would just scuff it up, and the more scuffs, the better. And back in the day, they experimented with different kind of leather on the ball, and they used cowhide or something, some softer leather at one time, and that's when they first started cupping the end of the bat. You take off a half ounce or whatever at the end of the bat, so it's a little cup at the end, which means there's a little sharp edge on and somebody hit one off the end of the bat, and the ball would go fair, and there'd be the ball with this big flap of leather off like that. It'd be rolling on there, and some guy had to pick it up, and you could pick it up like this on the leather, like that, and they'd try to throw it over, and then they'd finally throw it out. But but then you had some pitchers that weren't too smart anyways, especially those left-handers, you know what I mean? I take a ball, and you know how you go, well, I'm going to get an advantage here. So you catch the ball, and you take it, and on the ground, you just go on the ground like that, just kind of subtly, yeah, right, like this, and you throw it back. So now there's a nice dirt scuff on one side, and the pitchers go, and throw it out. You go, wait a minute, I'm trying to help you out. What are you trying to do here? Then that pitcher would throw it out, and then you'd get guys like Nolan Ryan, who had the same scuff marks on every ball, like 3 scuff marks right there. And umpire would look at it, oh, that's okay, and throw it back. No, curveball in the dirt, they go, no, throw it out.
Yeah. I know when it came to the rivalry between the two teams, you were as intense and old school as anybody on the Red Sox. Who among your teammates, though, do you think matched you in terms of that intensity of just not liking the Yankees? Was there any teammate that was at the same level as you?
Kinda, but no.
No.
I took the game personally when we played the Yankees because I thought I had something to do with how the team played because I, quote unquote, was in charge of my pitchers. And that doesn't happen anymore because the catchers aren't in charge of anything anymore. They have to look in the dugout to get whatever pitch they're going to throw. But I thought I had more to do with how the team was rolling than other people. And then, of course, when we were playing, it was the Yankees against the Red Sox, but it was also Fisk against Munson. And that's where the intensity was born, I think. Every time we got together, the media would concentrate on Fisk versus Munson. And then, oh yeah, it's the Yankees versus the Red Sox. But the guy who was there from the beginning of all that was Yaz. And Yaz kind of set the tone for that. He wasn't as demonstrative as I was. But he was the guy that if you wanted to watch how to play a game for 20 years, you want to watch how to prepare to play a game, you could go and watch Yaz.
He was not only the leader in terms of what you're saying, but he was also the veteran statesman. He'd been there since the early 1960s. I've also heard an incredible work ethic that he had. Not a lot that was necessarily reported on, but the work that he put in spring training, before games, legendary. Talk a little bit about that.
It was eye-opening for me. I'd always, up until the time I met Yaz, well, first of all, I grew up in New Hampshire, and in 1967, Carl Yastrzemski had a year that was almost unmatched by anybody ever in the American League, where he won the Triple Crown. So, and that's when they played St. Louis in the World Series, and Jim Lomborg and all the rest of it. And so that's the year I got signed. It was in '67. So I'm going to spring training, and Yaz is bigger than life. And so in my mind, Yaz is the ultimate stud. And I'm picturing a guy 6'3", 225, that can just run and hit and throw and stuff. And I went, oh, that's Yaz? Oh, he's what, 5'10", maybe? Weighed 185 pounds. I go, oh, I'm so disappointed. And then you see him play, and you go, oh, yeah. When that was before everybody went to the weight room or went to the gym or all that, that's when all Yaz did was work on his skills. He worked on his outfield skills, his throwing skills. But what impressed me most was he would be in the batting cage and hit and hit and hit, and he'd take half his swings against the machine, or we did a little drill called a soft toss or the tee, whatever, just to line himself up. He'd take hundreds and hundreds of swings with a weighted bat, live. I mean, off the machine, and I mean, wasn't just I'm just swinging this to loosen up. No, he actually used his bat to try to hit the ball, and then you see, with a regular bat, and he'd spend just hours preparing to his game. So that's the first indication you say, well, this is pretty serious stuff. This isn't high school baseball anymore. Most of the guys at that level, when they first get there, have always relied just on their natural athletic ability. That's what you are. And as you go along, you're the big frog in the small pond, so you're always the bigger frog than everybody else. And you never really had to say, okay, I need something to get the edge on the other guy that's just as athletic as I am. And that's where Yaz set the tone.
Let's jump ahead a few years. Another prominent video featured in our new exhibit. It's from a game August 2nd, 1985. By now, you're with the other Sox team, Chicago White Sox. You're playing a game at Yankee Stadium. It's funny how the Yankees always seem to be involved. The principals involved in this particular game were Ricky Henderson, Bobby Meacham, and Dale Berra, among others. Pick it up from there, Carlton.
Well, I went from the Red Sox to the White Sox. I changed my socks. It's a good thing sometimes, too, I guess. But I'm on the White Sox, and I go into Yankee Stadium, and I'm prepared for the way they treat me when I was wearing a Red Sox uniform. Fisk, you suck! Start throwing crap at you, And I go in there in a White Sox uniform, I go, so the White Sox come in, it's like, oh, here's another team. But
it's like you're wearing a costume. They don't recognize you.
Inside, I felt the same, the same feelings towards that team and towards that organization and the stadium and everything. But this night was, this day was incredible. There's nobody out, and two guys on. Meacham and Berra are on base. So you got Meacham at first base, and I forgot now who was on first. But
Meacham was at second, Berra
Meacham
at
was
first.
second. That's right. Meacham was at second, and Berra was at first because Ricky Henderson comes up, and there's nobody out, and everybody's expecting a big rally. So Henderson hits a ball, left center field, splits the fielders, bounces off the wall. The guy, the center fielder, plays it perfectly. And this whole time, everything's in front of me like this. And so Berra sees that it's going to be in the alley. Mm-hmm. Meacham doesn't. So Berra and Meacham kind of run into each other at second base. Meacham going back, Berra going too. And so now they finally say, oh, well, it's not going to be caught. So now they come around third base. And I'm going, let's see. Jeez. Guy gets the ball, and he throws it to the cutoff guy. Now, what am I going to do? One of these guys is definitely going to be out because it's perfectly thrown, perfect relay. So now one guy comes around third base, and here comes Ozzie Guillen and makes his throw, and it's a one-hopper to me. And I've got the ball from here to, third base coaching box almost. But the whole time I said, do I tag one of them? Do I stack them both up? What do I do? Push one aside, get the other guy? All this stuff was just, had that much time to figure it out. So sure enough, here comes Meacham around third, and I've got the ball, and he's like over that wall over there. So I tagged him, and I'm going, oh yeah. And I'm looking down there too, because Meacham goes by Gene Michaels, who's at third base. He's waving Meacham on and going like this to Berra. So Meacham goes by, he's trying to hold Berra up, Berra goes by, and then there's Gene Michaels going. So now they come by, and Meacham tries to bowl me over. He almost does. I come back and get Berra. We're all on the ground, and we get up. There's 2 outs, and I get up, and I'm fully expecting Ricky Henderson to be the third guy, right?
Yeah.
As fast as he can run,
Yeah.
I'm saying, if he just runs, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. But I get up, and I was kind of disappointed he wasn't there, I think. And so it went from a man on first base with a man at first and second with nobody out to a man on second with 2 outs. And here's Ricky Henderson at second base going, why did I have to hit that with those 2 guys on base?
Yeah.
Because, he should have had a triple, and they should have had 2 runs, and we should have been behind. But
Yeah.
it
Now,
wasn't.
in looking at that video, I noticed after you tagged Dale Berra, you had something of a disgusted look on your face. Why was that?
Well, there's 2 things. I thought I should have stacked them up. One. I thought I should have just, here comes Meacham, just stack him up and have Berra run into him, and we're all falling on the ground.
Yeah.
Like in a scrum right there. We're going to do that. And then 2, I was disappointed that Ricky wasn't right behind me. Because I thought he should have been.
It's got to be the weirdest play you've ever been involved in.
The weirdest play I've been involved with, probably.
Yeah.
There's been other plays at the plate that are really weird. They all seem to have to do with the Yankees, though. I don't
Yes.
understand that.
That
I've had
theme
some-
does come up.
I've had some weird conversations with pitchers and some stuff like that. But as far as a defensive situation that manifested itself like that, was just, one of those things. Crazy.
Now, the Berra Meacham play is in the middle of the 1985 season. After that season, it's not that well remembered today, but I certainly remember it. You almost became an ex-White Sox. The White Sox and Yankees actually negotiated a 7-player trade. Would have sent Don Baylor, Ron Hasse, Joe Cowley, and Marty Bystrom to Chicago for pitcher Britt Burns, infielder Scott Fletcher, and you. According to some of the newspaper reports that I read, and I was growing up in the New York City area, so I was reading the Daily News, the Post, the Times. According to some of those reports, the deal was done. Carlton Fisk was coming to the Yankees, but it never happened.
Good thing.
Good thing. Baylor had a no-trade clause. He had asked to be traded, but he didn't want to go to the White Sox for whatever reason, so he rejected the deal. You ended up staying in Chicago. How would you have felt, looking back at that time? It's easy to joke now, but looking back, how would you have felt about going to the Yankees at that time?
The thing that people really, I don't know if anybody really here really understands the reason all that stuff might have happened was that after 85 was the beginning of collusion. And organizations, management, the ownership, basically wanted to get rid of some of their players. So when that happens, and it's no wonder that players and ownership had all this confrontational relationship. But the good thing that happened there for me was that in the basic agreement, there's a clause in there that says if you're a 10-5 guy, which means if you've played in the major leagues 10 years and you've spent the last 5 years with the same team, that they can't trade you without your permission. And so Baylor refused to be traded on his end, and I refused to be traded on my end. And I didn't know how close it was. They approached me, said, because of the collusion thing, Carlton, I know you've come in from the East Coast, and we don't want to hold you back, and we don't want to keep you here if you don't want to be here, and so we'll let you go anytime you want to go. And so you kind of knew what was going on then.
Yeah.
But no, I 10-5 those guys.
So even if Baylor had said yes, you were not prepared at that point.
No.
Now, you ended up becoming a free agent, and then you re-upped with Chicago, even though collusion was still going on.
Well, that free agent takes on a whole different definition in collusion.
Yeah.
yeah, you may be free, but nobody wants you. And that's what happens in collusion. You know, nobody wanted you. Nobody outbid anybody else. You know, I could have gone to the Yankees. I could have gone to Cleveland. I could have gone to, where else? One other team. And every offer was exactly the same. So even though, quote unquote, you became a free agent after '85, that they weren't free. There was no place to go until that whole collusion issue was solved or dealt with. How many of years later? 5 years later, I think, you know, when the Players Association filed a grievance against the owners of collusion, and they took it to arbitration, and blah, 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 blah. And they ruled in favor of the players, and so then there had to be compensation, and then there had to be damage awards, and blah. So it got to be pretty involved there for a while. But there was no, you know, for 5 years, there was no free agency.
Yeah. So you end up going back to Chicago and had a pretty good finish to your career, all things considered. You finally wrapped things up in 1993. And then 7 years later, you enter the Baseball Hall of Fame. When you came here for your induction, was that the first time you'd been here, or had you been here before?
I'd been in Cooperstown before. I played a couple exhibition games in the Doubleday Field
You
over
had.
there. The last time we came here was in '92. When Jeff Torborg was a manager, we came here and played, and it was pretty cool because that was the year Tom Seaver was inducted in the Hall of Fame, and I had caught Tom Seaver. I think I caught the last 16 wins he had before I caught his 300th win in New York against the Yankees. So it always seems to be the Yankees involved here. I'm not quite sure.
What was it
But-
like
so
catching
that was pretty
Seaver?
special.
What was it like catching Tom Terrific?
The worst part about it, I was probably his fourth favorite catcher, you know,
Really?
because he had Jerry Grody in New York and Johnny Bench in Cincinnati. Then we had a backup catcher named Mark Hill. We called him the Booter.
Yeah.
And so I was joking about, yeah, you know, Booter's your number 3 catcher. Yeah, I know, I'm number 4, blah, blah, blah. But catching him was, it was a joy. You know, he knew how to get guys out. I knew how to get guys out. And we worked so well together, it was crazy. Because he always said, you know, there's 3 things that get guys out: velocity, location, and ball movement. And he said, if I can go on the mound with 2 of those things, I can win. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have all that stuff. I don't have to throw 99 miles an hour. So we worked on that aspect. The funny part about it was he had one day in Chicago, and he was bouncing balls, and he was, you know, all over the place, and I'm chasing him. So finally I get up and I go, you know, and that's when I could throw then. Can't anymore, but bam, I'm throwing a ball back here, and he looks at me like this. Another one, I go, yeah, boom, and I'm throwing a ball back, and he goes, come out here. I went, oh, geez. So I go out, and he goes, hey, who's pitching here, you or me? And I say, the way you're throwing, I might as well be out here, and you might as well be back there. But we get along pretty good.
You've become a familiar face here in Cooperstown. We see you pretty much every summer for the induction. But when you're not here in Cooperstown representing the Hall of Fame, what kinds of things are you doing to keep busy these days?
I planted a couple of trees by the house lately.
Yeah?
Yeah. I like doing stuff like that.
You like staying around the house?
I have 10 grandkids.
Wow.
They keep me pretty busy, which is kind of fun. I have 7 girls and 3 boys, and they're a lot of fun. I mean, I think that's what everybody looks forward to. I did, and one of the greatest things is that it was a bumper sticker I saw in Florida one time that said, shoot, if I'd known grandkids were going to be this much fun, I'd had them first. But I have worked out a little gig with the White Sox where I go in and schmooze, act like a big deal, and we go to certain suites and, you know, sort of be there with the season ticket holders or sponsors or advertisers or a corporate function or outing. So that's always fun to go to the ballpark. And a similar thing with the Red Sox, where they have a designated suite. It's called the Legends Suite. And every home game, they have a former Red Sox player in that suite to, I don't know if entertain's the right word, to probably just schmooze and mingle with people. And it's great to go back to the ballpark because people actually think you were good, you know? That was you know, the funny part about it is that it's so great to go back to the ballpark now, because back in the day when we started playing, there wasn't all that good feeling between the organization and the players. There was always a headbutting. I mean, always, because the owners were, you know, owners owned everything, and the players had nothing. I mean, you didn't have any pensions or benefits or freedom rights, or, you know, you had all these issues. And as all those collective bargaining negotiations went on, the relationship between the players and the owners got worse and worse and worse. And I'm sure everybody here got to feeling badly or sort of fed up with all the legalities that were going on in the newspapers. But if you'd have seen what was available to the players back in the, you know, from way back, and it started in the late 60s, where the players organized and were able to, you know, establish a players association and then argue for the right to take your talent out there and see who else wants it. Because before, you had to talk with one team. You could be the best player in the world, and they could offer you a salary for the worst player in the world. And you couldn't, and they said, well, I'm not going to take that. They said, well, go home. That's all. You don't want to play here? Go home. And so that whole thing in the 70s, you know, just confrontation. I mean, you go out here and see the exhibit, you see the work stoppages and the confrontations that went on. Well, that basically is all over with now. So the players and the owners are getting along so much better now. You know, the revenues are so high, the game is prosperous, the owners are making a lot of dough, the value of the organizations are going out of the roof, the players are making more money than they know what to do with. So everything is kind of fun, you know, everything's kind of smooth, everything's kind of hunky-dory. But you go back in the beginning and see the wars that were fought for the situation that's going on now, for the organizations and the players that take full advantage of the system. It's incredible from where they were, where we were, to where they are. It's incredible, the progress.
These two gentlemen, part of that changing of the landscape, they had to fight for rights for the players. Both became free agents at one point. Tremendous careers for both Carlton Fisk and for Raleigh Eastwick. We thank both of you for joining us. In just a couple of moments, we're going to let you all out, but I want to just take care of a couple of housekeeping items. Reminder that at 1 o'clock in the Bullpen Theater, Dick Flavin, who did our introductory poem, is going to do a program on poetry in our Bullpen Theater. It's coming up at 1 o'clock. That's over in the library. Also, I want to remind anybody that's in the Janetschek group, guests of Bill Janetschek, your tour is going to be starting at noon in the library atrium, just a couple of minutes from now. And then the donor appreciation members, your tour will begin at 2:30, also in the library atrium. So those tours are coming up this afternoon. Fans, let's have a nice round of applause for our two guests.
One quick short story about Carlton's home run. I still text a lot with Pat Darcy. We've remained friends, and I saw Pat and Johnny Bench and some others at a Reds event a few years back, and we were standing around talking, and Bench was getting all over Pat for, what'd you throw that pitch for? And Darcy says, well, what are you getting mad at me for? You called it.
Our thanks to a key member of the Big Red Machine, Raleigh Eastwick. And our Hall of Fame catcher, class of 2000, Carlton Fisk. Thank you, gentlemen.